And so we had this Sunday breakfast one day, and it was my mom, my dad, me and my sister, and this guy. And this guy came over and he had a suit on, and I'm like 10. I really don't want to be there. And we're having breakfast, and yeah, yes, sir, sir. And I come from the generation where it was, don't speak unless you're spoken to. So we would say there and we would be quiet, and this guy would say, so, Harry Jr., what did you do? Oh, I did this. Yes, sir. And I figured he was a celebrity or politician or something. Well, a couple of weeks later, my mom, I'm with her getting her oil changed, and there's this guy in his mechanic's outfit covered in oil or whatever. I'm like, that's that dude who was at our house. She's like, yeah, that's Mr. Smith. It's like, well, what was he doing there? She's like, well, he's a nice man, and we appreciate him. And it clicked in my mind, like, oh wait, you don't have to be like a big celebrity to like come dress up and come have, and it sounds very basic, but when you see that example, I don't care who you're talking to, young, old, black, white, gay, straight, whatever religion, I try to love all of them, not tolerate them or accept them, love them. And I find I'm at so much more peace for me. When I go to bed at night, I pray for the people that have given me problems, almost before I pray for the people that I love. Just love people. It's so much easier.
It's so good. It's so good.
Thank you.
It's so beautiful. It reminds me of a quick story, which I didn't think I would tell you, but it's just so beautiful. So my rabbi's wife was in New York City getting ready. It's Rosh Hashanah. It's like the biggest day of the year. She's like planning all this stuff, and she's late for shul, the synagogue, because everyone's already gone. She's getting the house ready, and she walks outside, and this homeless man walks up to her on Rosh Hashanah, which is like the biggest holy day. And he says, can I come to your house for a meal for the high holidays? And he's clearly a homeless person. And she thinks for like 1 second, and then she says to him, yes, yeah, I'll be back, And he starts to walk away, and they're living in the city. So she starts running after him. She says, you don't know my apartment. You don't know my address. And he says, I just wanted to know what your answer would be.
Wow.
That story has never left me, and I've never told that to anybody, but.
Can I tell you one that I've never told to anybody?
Oh my God. Yes.
All right. So I have to tell the story to give you the ending, but I would rather leave out the part that shines light on me, but I have to tell that part. So I was doing a movie in New Orleans, and every day I would drive past this particular area under the Claiborne Bridge where there were 50 homeless people every day, sleeping in tents, whatever. It bugged me. So I decided to go to McDonald's and, buy, 100 Egg McMuffins or whatever it was. So I put all the stuff in the car and I brought it to him. And I noticed when I was handing it out that they weren't like particularly effusive, right? They just kind of took it, and I just thought that I didn't care, but I just thought that was interesting. Well, I was in New Orleans, my dad was there, and I really wanted my dad to know that I did this so he'd be proud of me, which is not the reason I did it, and I shouldn't have thought about it, but I'm telling you this to be as frank with you as I can. So I was looking for the right opportunity to tell my dad, so I didn't want to make it sound like, Dad, I gave all this food to these homeless people. I was telling the story from the perspective of how they responded to it, because I figured that would be more casual. So I said, Dad, I gave this food to these homeless people, and they weren't like really thankful. They just kind of took it. And I was expecting, oh, that's interesting. You'd think they would be thankful. You know what he said? They treated me the same way when I brought them food. He had never told me that story. And it would hit me like a brick wall. Like, I learned so many lessons that day. You don't need your right hand to know what the left hand is doing all the time. Why are you doing this? Are you doing this for you? Are you doing this for praise for you? Or are you doing it for those people? Are you really doing it for those people? And the fact that my dad didn't tell me that, the fact that he did it and didn't tell me that, and I'm like, what else has he done? And it was a great lesson in humility and love. And, that's just like what I can sense you try to do. That's what I try to do. I just try to be better, man. Try to be better. In the title track on this album, Alone with My Faith, there's the bridge And you know what a bridge is in music, right? So in the bridge, it says, I just got to work a little harder right now. I just got to dig a little deeper right now. I just got to look a little closer at myself. Take my time, keep my faith.
Let's talk about this stunning, gorgeous, generous book that you wrote that has helped people through dark times and good times. Broken Horses. It came out a few months ago. So what did you want people to walk away with reading this book?
Well, different kinds of people. I wanted to walk away with different things. And some of these things I didn't realize until after I was hearing the feedback for the book. And one of them, some of them have been about, I'm not going to get too buzzwordy, but about like representation, like queer people that are having kids or getting married or struggled when they couldn't get married or had a hard time with adoption. Have felt like really seen by the story and the concept of like our parenting journey and the way that it changed the way we related to each other. It changed. And I wanted to know if there were other queer people like me experiencing deep and resounding faith rejection, but still wanting their faith, which was really, that was a coming out of the closet moment for me, where it was like, I was feeling like I wanted to be honest about being a Jesus girl and wondering if that would make gay people not accept me in the same way that I wondered if saying I was gay would make Jesus people not accept me when I was a kid. So I wanted to know if I was the only one with that. Definitely not the only one with that. And then there are people that are interested in what I do for a job, that have music inside of them, want to follow their dreams. And so I thought maybe it'd be fun to put a step-by-step to my own trajectory and all the hilarious and complicated things that got me to here. And I didn't know if I had an interesting story until after I wrote it. And then I realized, yeah, it's really interesting. And a lot of people's lives are really interesting. And I strongly, strongly recommend that even if you don't know what you want, anybody that's listening to this, write your life. Write it. Even if it's just for you, you will not believe how interesting you are and how healing and informative it can be to the rest of your life if you just pause and take a look at it chronologically. Mine your soul like that. It's unbelievable, the growth that I've experienced, in my soul from writing that book.
I saw a little article in the paper said, hey, how Michael Jordan was tired of taking the physical abuse for the Detroit Pistons. So I said, okay, let me think about this. I was like, I'm going to send 14 letters to every single player on the Bulls organization except Michael Jordan. I said, he's already so good, but if he sees the work I do with somebody else, he may take notice and I can get with him later on. And back then, remember, no emails, no text messages, no nothing. So I literally hand wrote the letters, went out, got stamps, I put them in the mailbox. All right. I said, we'll see what happens. Obviously, one of the letters got to one of the players. Michael actually pulled it out of somebody else's locker and said, hey, find out what this kid's about. And the team physician and the athletic trainer at the time, they contacted me and literally put me through 3 months of more vigorous questions and training than I had in my 6 years of college to make sure I knew what I was doing. But they didn't tell me who the client was. They did not tell me who it was. So after 3 months, they gave me an address and like, hey, go, here's the address. Go ring the person who wants to meet you at 1:30. So I go to the house. Before then, this was before the big gated house and all. I just rang the doorbell. Nobody answered. Rang it twice. Nobody answered. Rang it third time. Finally, Michael Jordan ends up opening up the door.
No way.
Yeah. So that was my moment. That was my moment when, and I'm not a starstruck person, but everything I had prepared for up to that time, everything I'd seen my parents do, everything I sacrificed, taking the low end jobs, preparing myself, knowing more about my craft than the next person, allowed me to sit down in front of this individual, explain to him what my philosophies were, what my thoughts were, and it was totally different than what everybody else had brought up to him. And he said, hey, listen, let's try it out for 30 days. 30 days turned into 15 years. He was actually my first professional client. All right. And the caveat to this story that I really don't share with too many people is, for the first 3 years, he never paid me. Okay, not because he didn't want to. I never asked him for it. And then he finally, one day we finished the workout, he went upstairs and he came back down and he goes, I've never paid you. I said, yeah. And he goes, well, how much do you want? I said, Michael, that's not for me to say. I said, you tell me what my value is to you. All right. He wrote a check, put it in an envelope. To this day, I don't know how much that check was. I took that envelope and handed it to my parents. I said, thank you. Thank you. I think the check was pretty significant because my dad got a new car. My mom redid the whole house. But this was a way of me saying to them, thank you for believing in me.
We just went to, on the way home from our Tennessee trip, we stopped in Orlando and we took the kids to Epcot Center. And Figment says, we see far more with our minds than with our eyes. And the more that I've learned and the more that I've studied it, it's just amazing how when we pray or meditate, we often close our eyes, right? And we see greater with our eyes closed sometimes. And I think that all of the work that you do and the way that you speak, it kind of drops us into really the generous, the pregnant present moment, which is just pregnant with possibility.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, Disney World itself, I grew up within a stone's throw of Disney World. Did you know that?
No.
Yeah. And I remember looking at my mother when they bought that. It was probably around 1970 or something like that, when they bought that piece of land. And my mother and I looked at each other and said, really? They sold that piece of land? It was 30,000 acres of swamp when I was growing up. And the fact that Disney flew around it in a helicopter and said, hey, I can do something here. That's a great example of that. Another, some of us know, he's now deceased now, but Art Linkletter, he tells a story of riding around in a car with Walt Disney before Disneyland in California and given an opportunity to invest in it. Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think you can make a go of that sort of a thing, Walt, and so he loved to tell that story on himself. But, let's just say the subject of receiving is vast and limitless. And I believe is a holy task that we get from the moment we get here on this planet to balance out our ability to receive and our ability to give. And this, I believe, is an era of receiving, where most of the people who listen to this podcast and watch you will be in the pretty proficient in the art of giving. But let's get everybody as proficient in the art of receiving so that you can have your full measure of love, abundance, and creativity. That's really what the Genius Zone is all about, is how to live there and how to kind of steer yourself, navigate along like a bird flies so that you get to ride the wind currents and stay there. Because it's one thing to kind of break through into your Genius Zone. It's another thing to actually suspend yourself there and move along in that genius flow all the time.
Tell us about being on The Big Bang Theory, because people don't like the show. They love the show. It's a part of their physical body. That's how they speak of it, and you and that character.
Yeah.
So what was that whole experience like for you?
Well, when I auditioned for The Big Bang Theory, I had just started acting again. I had a nursing, he was probably, I think he was about 1, but he was exclusively breastfed. So literally when I left him to go audition for things, it was like, good luck, Mike.
Right.
Yeah, I had a toddler and I had a nursing infant, you know, when I auditioned for The Big Bang Theory. I had never seen it. I thought it was a game show because I
Oh,
heard that I was mentioned in season 1. And I was like, oh, because it must be like a game show of like, what star used to be a, you know, a neuroscientist. Anyway, never mind. I'm crazy. So I did not get the job because I'm a scientist. The character actually didn't even have a profession in the season finale of season 3, which is when I came on the show as a guest star, possible recurring. And they said they wanted a female Jim Parsons. I had no idea who Jim Parsons was. The show was already very successful by then. I think he had just won like his second Golden Globe Award. So I Googled Jim Parsons playing Sheldon. I was like, oh, I know people like that. I think I'm like that. So I just like imitated him and I got the job. And I didn't even know that it would turn into being a regular. I was a mom. I was teaching neuroscience for 5 years. I designed a curriculum for junior high and high school students in our homeschool community. I was tutoring piano. Like I did a lot of things to make ends meet. You know, I didn't have money from Blossom. Like that wasn't a thing. People didn't make the money you think, especially teenage girls. And
wow.
so, yeah, I was budgeting. I was doing all the things that people do. And I was driving to Pacific Palisades when I was in grad school to like make $20 an hour tutoring a kid Hebrew. Like I was a
Oh
person.
my God. That's
I was
hard
just
to
like
even.
I was just like a normal person. I mean, I was a normal person of privilege, you know, struggling in Los Angeles to pay rent and do all those things and have health insurance. And I was running out of health insurance is why I wanted to start auditioning for things again, because I just needed to try and work a couple even guest spots, a couple guest spots so that I could just try and get my insurance back.
Wow.
So I got The Big Bang Theory. They made me a regular in season 4. And Fred was about 18 months then. I pumped for 2 years on set. Like I was a pumping working mom. I did obviously nurse a long time, but that's also totally my prerogative. And I lived as a working mom then in a situation where I was not planning on being the working mom. Like that wasn't what life was going to look like. But very grateful to my now ex-husband, you know, for whether we were married or divorced, he was an at-home parent for our boys. Our kids have always been homeschooled, so he is both their teacher and their driver and their everything. And that's how our family works. We don't use nannies, never have. I clean my own toilets. Like that's what our life is like. So during all those years of Big Bang Theory, you know, I was going through that. I went through a divorce. My father died, which is very, very significant in my life. That was 6 years ago. So yeah, that was Big Bang Theory. And like 9 years later, I woke up and it was over and here we are.
Then I got an audition for Curb Your Enthusiasm. And it was all improvised. I really didn't know who Larry David was. I knew that he had created Seinfeld with Jerry Seinfeld, but I didn't know anything about him, you know. And they said, listen, when you go into the room, don't touch Larry. He doesn't like for people to touch him. I was like, okay. And they said, and it needs to feel real because the tone of the show, it needs to feel real. And if it doesn't, the audition will be over. And I was like, okay. And then I went in and met Larry and I just sparked with him. You know, it was interesting because I was expecting like a troll in the corner with long nails and a cloak. And he seemed much more normal than I was expecting. But we just started improvising and they wanted an unknown talent, which worked out great for me because nobody knew me. And then they hired me. That's my little story.
So when you started that first clothing, that first business, how did that begin? Like, how did you get your first customer? How did you get that first sale? What lit the match?
It happened by mistake. I saw a hat that I really loved, but it looked like a ski cap, and instead of the ball on the top, it was open on the top. So you took a piece of the fabric of the hat and you tied like a string. I saw it in a De La Soul video, and I wanted to buy it, and I bought it. And I remember showing my mother the hat, and she said, "That's a poorly constructed hat, and I can't believe you paid $20 for that hat." She said, "You don't have enough money to just keep buying hats like that. When I showed you the basics of sewing, I'll show you how to sew that hat." So I go to the store, I get $40 worth of fabric so I can make a couple of hats. And I come home and my mother shows me how to sew the hats. But I didn't realize that I wasn't thinking about it. I bought the same roll of fabric. So now I had 80 hats that looked like the same exact striped candy cane and one head. And I realized I'm never going to wear all these hats. I don't want to give them away to all my friends because then all my friends will look exactly like me. So it was 1989. It was Good Friday. It was about 3:15 in the afternoon. It was around 47 degrees outside. And I stood outside on the corner and I tried to sell those hats. And in 1 hour, I sold $800 worth of hats. And I remember saying to myself, I made these hats with my own hands. It was my ability to show value to the customer, whether it is this matches the outfit, this is the hip hat you saw in De La Soul video, this is gonna make your head feel warm. You're gonna look like you're onto the new things like in hip hop. And it was my ability to relay this message to them. And now I have $800. And I will never have to work for anybody ever again for the rest of my life. Now, reality set in, I worked at Red Lobster for 5 years after that. But that moment was the moment of like, and I think everybody can experience this or feel that. It's a culmination of a bunch of actions and thoughts. And then when that goal starts to unfold in front of you, it's like, God damn it, that is it. It doesn't mean that's going to be it forever. But it was that moment that changed my life.
Well, I said at the beginning of the show when we started 4 years ago that I felt that the opposite of depression wasn't necessarily happiness, but a sense of purpose. And a lot of people listening don't even feel that they could possibly be needed. What do you think about being in service?
Well, I think the best way for people to test this theory is particularly right now when we're in quarantine and
right.
Depression is at its highest, loneliness is at its highest, anxiety is at its highest. All of these things are peaked right now in children and adults. The quickest way to fill any void that you feel is to give away that which you need the most. You give it away. If you're sitting at home feeling like, oh my God, I feel so lonely, I feel so alone. You know what? Go somewhere in your apartment building where you know maybe an elderly person is living by themselves, or down on the corner, there's somebody down there that's struggling. Go knock on their door and say, hey, you don't know me, but I'm so-and-so, and I'm sure you don't want to give me your phone number, but here's mine. If you would like to talk, here's my phone number. I'm on the way to the store. Can I pick you something up? I'll leave it on your front porch for you. Or if you're out mowing your yard, when you get to the driveway, just keep going and mow the neighbors. If you just give away that which you need the most, I promise you it will fill you up faster than any pill you can take, any therapy you can get. Anything you can do, give away what you need the most, it'll fill you up fast.
The idea of don't keep your day job is to quit the day job if the day job is synonymous with something that doesn't light you up. And instead, it's a euphemism for doing the things that do make you feel a sense of purpose, that do make you feel that flow state, right? When you've looked at that, what is purpose? Like, what is it that we could utilize as a compass to even help us? When you said that, it's like, yeah, for some people it's a hobby, you said, right? For some, but like what does it actually mean? What for these folks in these blue zones, how are they defining purpose? What is that on a daily basis for them?
So in blue zones, a little bit different than America, that purpose also kind of metabolizes the notion of responsibility. So it's often there, you'll see these older people who are passing down a martial art, or they're teaching basket weaving. they're so proud of their culture, and part of it is making sure that lives on through younger generations. Or especially all blue zones, here in America, we tend to celebrate youth and sort of cast aside older people and warehouse them in retirement homes. But in blue zones, the older you get, the more revered you are. And these people's wisdom and resilience and knowledge is harnessed to favor so these older people, their purpose often beyond their regular work life is continuing to take their wisdom and put it to work in younger generations. So, for example, in Sardinia, longest lived men in the world, you see the vintners. I know at least 2 vintner that are over 100. They're taking these ancient winemaking techniques and making sure they stay alive. I wrote this book, The Blue Zone Kitchen, 100 Recipes to Live to 100. And I went into the homes of about 80 old women. They are the keepers of the food tradition. And it's this diet that explains probably 6 years of their life expectancy. And in many cases, these recipes are 500 years old.
Wow.
And they take millennia of observed cooking wisdom, and they incorporate it in making this peasant food taste delicious.
Yeah,
and then of course Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi, who just died.
Yep.
He was the author of Flow.
Mm-hmm.
And one litmus test of knowing whether or not you have purpose is if that which you do on a daily basis, you can occasionally get so enraptured with it, so involved with it, that time disappears. 2 or 3 hours disappear. And that could be right. From my case, it could be writing. Other people, it's art. Other people, it's coding or designing. If you find yourself losing track of time frequently, you've got it. You're on the right track.
That feeling of not being present for your life, that feeling of constantly kicking the can down the road, that the goal of that happy feeling or finally receiving that which you have been building, one day you think you will finally put your feet on the ottoman and have it, but you don't put your feet on the ottoman ever. And then go, what is this ride if it's always about getting to the next place and not being right here where my feet are? You just said that so well, but then what's literally blowing my hair back is the fact that you had the tools to then study the effects of it, to then literally open the Pandora's box, open the portal for all of us to see in a concrete way what's happening in our brain. And you've been giving us now through your work the answer to the question, like, how can you, instead of trying to keep changing your life, how can you just change the brain? So let's get into it.
Yeah.
What can we learn? And by the way, for everybody who's listening, she said, call me Amishi, but Dr. Amishi Jha just wrote this incredible book called Peak Mind. You have to go get it. Find your focus, own your attention, invest 12 minutes a day. And I just had Dan Buettner here talking about the blue zones. And of course, he said, why the centenarians? Because they meditate, because they reduce the inflammation, and the inflammation comes from the cortisol. And when we meditate, we are able to live longer. So all rivers lead to this ocean, and yet it is an enigma. We don't fully get it, grasp it, understand it. What did you find out? How can we begin to cross this river?
Yeah, great question. I love your enthusiasm. I just love that. I
love you.
I'm going to keep that in my ear all day long. But you're right. It was fortuitous that the very thing that I was searching I got some insight from my personal experience, and I was able to bring the rigor of science to actually answer the questions that would make it potentially of interest for more than just me. So that's what I was interested in was, I knew that I was a great case study of one, but I'm one person. And as a scientist, a lot of things can happen to one person that many, many people may not experience. So it became a very serious, it was like I had to be the most rigorous I've ever been in anything I've done, because I knew there was going to be a challenge in convincing myself and convincing other people that mindfulness actually had a chance of altering attention. But maybe the place to start is, let's just talk a little bit about attention, because I actually think this is why we're in a lot of pain right now. Kind of our current modern moment is one that feels an attentional crisis. And I felt that crisis personally. I felt it because I felt like I couldn't look at my own spouse and like see what was on his face. It was like I was blank. Or even trying to read research articles, like finding that the meaning just kind of was like evaporating. And probably my wake up moment happened with my son when I was trying to read to him. And this is something I valued so much. It was like a precious time in my day. No matter what my demands, I was going to do this. I wanted to be there. And I realized I wasn't even there then. So, these are real things. I mean, this is not life or death in that sense. I mean, we deal with people and professionals in my lab where an attentional lapse could literally mean life or death, whether it's a service member, first responder, or medical or nursing professional. It wasn't that for me, but it was this notion that life isn't really worth living unless you can really experience it in a way that you want. So, yeah. So, and it does come down to attention, because in many ways, I see attention as the fuel that we need in order to do very everyday things and very important things. And we can think of it as sort of, in some ways, a superpower, and some ways, the only way that we can even make sense of our world. So just to kind of broadly, do you mind if I talk a little bit about attention?
Yeah, I want you to. And I just want to say, when you said that, my entire body felt it, because as soon as you said those words, it's like, yeah, we are constantly overstimulated. And I haven't had that thought ever, what you just said about like, what is attention and where is it? And maybe some of the pain that we experience is because of the lack of attention. And then you said a few sentences later, like the experience of actually living your life. Like, what a mic drop sentence. Like, let's all just like sit and hold that. What would it feel like to actually have the experience of living the life you actually live? I mean, yeah. This is why I said to you before we started recording, you're everywhere. You've been on Joe Rogan, you've been on everybody's show, because your access to speaking this information into the world, you're doing it in such a clear, beautiful, profound way. And I am so excited. I feel just so grateful to be having this conversation. So let's talk about the attention.
Yeah.
How we can cultivate it and what the heck has happened. It's just become elusive, our attention.
It has, yet it's the thing that is constantly under so much attack in some sense. Everybody wants it. Every app wants it. 24/7, our colleagues, friends, families want it. It's the most sought after thing. And the thing is that we have to remember that we need to own it in some sense. And that's actually one of the parts that you mentioned in my book. Thank you for mentioning it. But yeah, find your focus, own your attention. I mean, that notion of owning our attention is not something most of us think about. It's just something we take for granted. It's something that we've always had. We may feel distracted or pulled by certain things, but this notion of it's ours, it's our intrinsic lifeblood in many ways is not something we usually think about. But just to back up, like, why do we even have an attention system? Why does it even exist in the brain? A lot of that comes out of, well, let's just put it this way. The way that our attention functions now, given all of the challenges we might be experiencing, given the crisis of attention we might be in, it's actually the success story of human evolution. We are the success story of human evolution. Whatever we have right now that we carry around in our brains was selected for, refined generation after generation. It didn't happen by accident, and it's not superfluous. We need it. We need it all the time. So one of the ways to think about why we have it and why we need it is, without attention, a brain without attention is essentially either completely blank, dark, doesn't understand the world, can't see the world from any of its senses, or it's a complete cacophony where so much is happening that it's only experiencing and not filtering. So the most broad way to put a definition of this term attention is that it was a way for the brain to solve a giant problem it had, which is that there's just far more out there in the world, and even within its own internal structures, than it could fully process. So attention is a way to select a subset of information, filter out everything that's not relevant, and highlight what is. And that's a way, if you think about, I use this metaphor a lot because I find it so handy. It's like we're in a darkened room. Just the phenomenology would be like we're in a darkened room and our attention is like a flashlight. So if you want to find out where the door is or figure out where you are, you survey the kind of external landscape.
Beautiful.
And wherever it
It's
is
a beautiful analogy.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and wherever it is that you point that flashlight, you get more information, richer, crisper, clearer information. The very cool thing about this capacity is, through the course of evolution, we didn't just have it to be able to direct it to the external environment, but we can direct it internally. And this is frankly what makes us so uniquely capable as human beings. If you have an idea that pops into your head, you can shine the flashlight on it and pursue it. It becomes prominent in your thinking and everything else kind of fades away. Or if you have a memory and you want to kind of bring it to mind, you've shined the flashlight on the memory and it has a richness to it that you might not have. So it becomes so useful for not just the external landscape, but the internal landscape. And that's just one way attention works. So just that's the starter for why we have it and how it works. I'll just say that one of the challenges I think that happens is, in addition to this flashlight being able to be directed to the external environment, to the internal environment, I think one of the reasons we have like a real pain point around our attention is because that same flashlight can get yanked around. So if you're in that same darkened room and you hear a weird rustling, you think you're alone, you hear a weird rustling, in that moment, you're going to take that flashlight and point it to wherever you heard the sound coming from. And why did you do that? Again, evolution designed us to quickly pivot to things that are threatening, uncertain, novel. And again, it's not just things in the external environment that have those qualities. If I have a thought that is threatening, fear-inducing, novel, my internal flashlight's going to get yanked to it. So there's always this tension between what I want to devote my focus on and what may pull it away instead.
We lost all of our money in 2008.
I know, I read about that.
And one thing I learned about loss.
Oh my God.
So I've had a lot of big lessons about loss, big lessons. I learned that before we lost all of our money, I had been living in a kind of ambient fear about, well, what if this and what if that? And what if we do lose our money? And what will we do with this? And are we this and are we that? And just there was still a fear level about anticipatory loss.
Yep.
And then, boom, gone. We had a couple $1,000s left because we were so dumb about what we did. But that's another story. What I learned in that process, and I want to say I would never, ever, ever trade that process for anything else. I would never go back and not have lost our money. Why? Because I saw what that losing our money allowed me to see what could never be lost.
Mm-hmm.
And what could never be lost was in those days, and I think still is, the ability to see, to breathe, to see what I wasn't seeing, like when we were talking about walking to the coffee maker and then see what I wasn't seeing because I was so caught up in my mind about, but what if, and do we have enough money? And what if I have to go to Germany and get my blood cleaned? And, will I have enough money for that? And these esoteric treatments in case I got sick, did we have enough money for that? And then we had nothing. And I am not kidding you that within a couple of weeks, I was happier than I'd ever been. Why? Because I noticed what I had and not what I might lose sometime. Because for the first time, I started looking at what was here, that my hands, my feet, my eyes, the fact that I was still married, that, that there was a sky, that I had a ceiling over my head. I didn't know how long I was going to have that ceiling over my head, but for now I had sardines, I had chocolate, and I had a roof over my head.
Amazing.
And when most of the time, most people don't let themselves have what they have.
Yeah.
Because they're afraid of losing it.
Yeah.
So they live in perpetual scarcity and perpetual poverty.
Yes.
So one of the practices that I teach and that I use every day is letting myself have what I already have.
I think most of us, certainly when we were children, were introduced to God as somebody over there, in heaven, somewhere up there, looking down at us and telling us what to do, requiring obedience, asking for praise. And I think as we get older, a lot of us will find that image of God disturbing. Well, the way the Kabbalah understands God is that God is not an individual being somewhere over there, but rather God is the universal self, that you are a soul and you are a part of what's called the soul of souls. That's what we mean when we say God. And that you and I and every other human being and actually all creatures are part of one shared self. And that's what we mean when we say God. Think of it like electricity. In your room, let's say you have a stove, a fridge, and a light bulb. And they're all connected to the same self, and that would be electricity. When electricity flows through the light bulb, the power of lighting becomes manifest. When it flows through the stove, the power of heating becomes manifest. And when electricity flows through the refrigerator, the power of cooling becomes manifest. So you are, let's say, your character that you're playing is a light bulb. You are the power of lighting, which is a limited manifestation of the electricity that you share with everybody. And that we're all on the deepest level connected to one self, one soul. We are like waves in an ocean of consciousness, each and every one of us. And that's why only love is real, because love is the realization that even though I'm not you and you're not me, I might be the power of lighting and you might be the power of cooling and you might be the power of heating, but we're all manifestations of this one energy, this one self, which is electricity. And we all know the golden rule, love your neighbor as yourself. What most people don't know is the continuation of that verse from the Bible is, I am all there ever is, was, and will be. I am reality. There is only one I am, which means that if there's only one I am, and you as an I am, and I as an I am, arrays of, facets of. If God were white light, we would each be a different color in the spectrum of that white light. If God were the sun, we'd be rays of the sun. If God were the ocean, we'd be drops in the ocean. These are metaphors. But what's important is understanding is that when we say God, we mean the universal soul, the one I am that we all share. And you become part of this one self, this one soul. And that is the search for God. The search for God is the search for love. Because love is a realization that on the deepest level, we are one. So love your neighbor as yourself is qualified when you realize that the higher self, the ultimate self, is the one self. And whether you want to call the one self God, it doesn't matter what word you use. What matters is what deed you do to realize and live this truth of that shared self that we're all part of.
You and your connection to your ultimate truth, to expansion, to yourself, to the next thing you need to know. It exists, but it's not in your awareness. The reason it's on your awareness is because when you're pulled into the worry and you're in your brain, you're in here, you're so in matter, you're so in the 3D, you're so in the predictable, you're so in the fear, you can't grab the awareness of the higher, elevated, better thing that's going to actually give you the next step into the future you really want to create. So in order to grab that awareness, you've got to get out of the fight or flight. You've got to get into something bigger. So every one of my friends, name a friend of mine, name anyone you look up to, Michael Jordan, Jerry Seinfeld, they're meditating every single day. There's a reason for it. There's a reason for it because the brain has no answers for you. It's in the feeling, it's in the awareness, it's in plugging into something that's beyond this limited fear body when we've practiced it, we've rehearsed it, we've mentally rehearsed this shame, this guilt, this doubt so many times, it just shows up for its work every day. I'm here, I'm back, you practice me. How about mentally rehearsing the future you want? Mentally rehearsing the expansion, the feelings you want to feel, looking at it. That is why the Bulls and the Lakers have the exact same place in the NBA. They had the same freaking coach. His name is Phil Jackson. He's the only coach in the NBA that said, we're going to meditate a third of the time. We're going to meditate. We're going to sit on our ass instead of making free throws. He goes, that's correct. You're going to feel the feeling of winning this national championship. You're going to freaking feel the feeling of it. And that feeling is so much more powerful than you dribbling more. Stop dribbling. Feel the feeling. Step into that expansion. You are connected to the creator of this freaking universe. You just don't tap into it. You have access to it. You don't allow it. So that's what you do. That's what you do. And you have to do it. You have to do it. Like if we're too busy to find time to step out of this low vibe, constant rehearsing of the brain and we're killing ourselves. I just had Dan Buettner on the podcast. He's coming on. I just interviewed him this week. He's responsible for finding the blue zones. Do you guys know about the blue zones? Okinawa, Loma Linda. This is insane. This is crazy. I said to him with tears, I go, the fact that you've uncovered this and written 5 New York Times bestsellers, putting this in the world and people heard it and they don't do it? What is wrong with us? Talk about resistance. There are 5 places in the world where the largest population of people who are in their hundreds are walking around, riding bicycles, healthy, happy. They all meditate. The brain creates cortisol. Every single disease in the body comes from inflammation. Cortisol makes the inflammation. when we drop it. Our body knows how to access the real hormones we need, oxytocin, right? Then we get into the awareness. That's how I become friends with Susie. That's how I start a good podcast. That's how I write the book. It's not from all this stuff that I'm going to sit here try to figure out. I got to get in the awareness of it. And that leads to the next awareness and the next awareness. And next thing you know, you're tuned to a different radio station, and everybody who's in that radio station bumps right into you.